Welcome to another episode of the Foureva podcast, where we dive deep into business, but also things that are personal, because business is personal. I am Jamar Jones, your host, and I am the owner of Foureva Media. I'm also a speaker and a future author of my book, Change Your Circle, Change Your Life, which is coming out on June 30th. And I got a special guest in the building today. We got Cory Kroll. Why don't you give yourself a good, introduction of who you are, what you do, so that way you let everybody know what you're about.
All right. Well, first of all, I've got a pre-order for the book, so I'm
He's
ready
waiting.
to go. Ready to go. I'm Cory Kroll. I own a few companies, Lifetime and Live Race Media, as well as I do Krollware, which is a technology consulting company. Also do gaming and other interactive projects for companies.
That's a lot. So hit this man up.
I keep busy.
Hit this
keep
man
busy.
up. He keeps busy.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
today came out here to talk about the power of hosting the party with E3 in mind. So we're going to be really diving into some of the philosophy of hosting the party, how they got all this attention, sponsors. The whole world kind of stops for about a week and really looks at the gaming industry.
Or at least it used to.
Yeah, well.
and that's a really interesting thing to talk about, I think.
Yeah.
And that is, we have to kind of rewind a little bit and go back to when, at least when I was a kid, when we were talking about gaming. And gaming was this thing that everyone made games and cartridges and things, and then they needed a trade show to go to the Walmarts and the Targets and the KB Toys and the Toys R Us, and all of that. And they needed a way to pitch their games for the year, because literally people would show up, they would see the games that they wanted, and they'd fill in their orders. And the Nintendo or Sony or whomever was around, Sega at the time, right, would all say, great. You want a million cartridges by X date, and they'd have it all ready, so that by the time the holiday season started coming into place, everyone would have everything ready so they could sell it to the kids in the holiday season, rinse and repeat for the next year. And that started at CES, which was a show in Chicago in January. It's moved to Vegas. Then eventually it became this big thing in LA called E3, which every year everyone would kind of converge on the Staples Center there on LA and do a major convention for 3 days on a show floor.
And you got the chance to go to
I did.
an E3
I did. In 2001.
extravaganza.
Yes. So in 2001 I went. That was a huge year.
Yeah, for sure. And now they've now transitioned again into more of a live stream, type platform. And we were just talking about that, because you were saying that was not by choice. That was kind of by the community saying, do we really need to be spending all this money? Part of this event? Do we really need to, gear up and get games like to a point where it's like they're not really ready to be shown, but we got to get it out for E3.
Yeah.
So it's like you had that pressure, and then it sounded like slowly but surely companies started backing out, and then eventually they're like, all right, you know what? You could showcase your own stuff.
Yeah. So E3 for a while was everyone crunch.
Yeah.
We're going to create some kind of a playable demo, sometimes at the sacrifice of releasing the game itself, because you have to kind of stop things and polish it up a little bit so that people could see it. And it's kind of abruptly stopped what they were trying to get done for the holiday season.
Right.
And it was kind of this known secret that it was a big pain for these teams, right? And this is kind of an interesting point as we talk about generally what do companies, why do you care about this, right? Even if you're not into technology, even if you're not into gaming, talking about trade shows and how you should market, and should you do a big extravaganza yourself? Should you attach yourself to something bigger? Should you do something live versus should you do something pre-produced and packaged nicely? Like there's a lot of things to think about, and these technology companies all went through that. Several years of it. There was that worry, like, I can't do this unless everyone else is doing it this way. I don't want to look like the odd man out. So there's a lot of things that I think were considered and evolved over time, especially as the internet became more relevant and people could easily go to YouTube and look at videos.
Oh yeah, for sure. You gotta change. You gotta transition.
Yeah.
At some point, and it's all about what can you do right now to, I think as a business, I think, bigger businesses have more flexibility. They got the budget, they got the money to be able to do things on a bigger scale.
Yes.
But I have seen, even on a small business scale, people host their own party and kind of create their own platforms and be able to do it on a smaller scale, but have more of a local big impact.
Yes.
Even it's funny if we're talking about gaming. We're really big into Smash. We love that game, super competitive about it, and it's just fun getting a group of guys together and playing. But what's interesting about that, and just getting into once again the tournament world, there's a lot of local. They don't got a ton of money, but they're just getting a couple switches together. They're getting in some TVs, and then they start to get leverage because now people want to be a part of it. They want to bring their own expertise to it, and that's how you start building some momentum on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen a lot of local comic book stores, even bars, and just how do you get your name out there? How do you get people to show up and see what you have to offer? A great way to do that is to host something like this, right? Because people get to see the facility, they get to experience the food, beverage, just your hospitality along with it. So there's a lot of good partnerships that can exist there locally and help promote a lot of good local business along with these.
Do you think it's more beneficial to attach yourself to other things, or do you think it's beneficial to start something your own and just do it solo all by yourself?
It's a tough question to answer. I don't think there's a one good solution to it. I think it really depends what you're trying to do. I think if you can attach yourself to something that helps you amplify, if at the end of the day you could reach more people and get your message out in a bigger way than doing it solo, then it's worth considering. But, and this kind of goes back to the E3 thing, which was interesting too. Once it got so big that you had Nintendo and Sega and Microsoft and Sony and Ubisoft and EA and all of these big companies all vying for time, what eventually happened is even big companies started to go, why are we doing this? We're paying millions of dollars for this booth that's right next to this other guy's $1 million booth. And it's like we're competing for time. And Nintendo, kind of being more of the innovator, was the first one to say, that's great, we're out. And that's what they did. One year they just said, we're not going to do, we'll still be on the show floor. They did in increments. We're not going to rent out the giant mega location for a big, we're just going to do a video. They produced very fun, engaging, unique videos that showcased all of their, what they were coming out with that year. And they just put it out there. One thing about that actually helped them too is because they produce it all in-house. They keep it a secret. About 2 or 3 days before the big show, someone's in there with a camera snapping pictures of the big posters and the set pieces, and it's already branded. It's already got the names. So leaks came out.
Oh, that was a big thing. That was a huge thing. I remember me being an avid 2K player. A lot of times 2K games were, because they usually come out in about October time frame. So you're looking for any type of inkling of what's the gameplay looking like? What's the what does it actually look like on a 5-on-5? And then every time E3 would come around, there would be somebody with a phone that's got some phone footage of their
get that crude stuff first.
Showcasing it, and then it would kind of blow the experience of here's the wow factor.
Right. No, and that's a big problem. And so they didn't like that, and they said, well, that's an added benefit too. So why not? So you can control the message more if you're doing it alone, and if you're pre-producing it, and you're controlling all aspects of it. If you're hosting the party, then you get to determine, what are the hors d'oeuvres? What games are we going to play? Who's going to get the first and last word? When are we kicking everyone else out? Right? You get to control all of that. So you've got to really make sure that culturally you have a good connection with whomever you're working with in any trade show, that it kind of fits the needs of the people that you want to impress, right? For some trade shows, it makes sense for it to go really late because it adheres to the people when they would normally work. If it's food and beverage, and that's going to probably do a different time frame than your white collar worker. We can do an 8 to 4 kind of thing and call it a day, right? You want to try to cater to the right audience.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of going back to E3, how important is it for these big companies to be a part of something like E3? And when I say companies, I'm talking about the big behemoths, but also these gaming publishers that are, you know, you got indie, you got so some of the people that are not as big as like, you know, the big boys that are there. How important is it to attach yourself to something like this versus, oh, I'm just going to kind of showcase my own thing at a different time frame? Like is E3, especially in gaming, is E3 it?
E3 isn't it anymore as much as it used to be. So I'll separate the two types, right? You get the behemoths like the Microsoft and the Sony and them, right? A lot of that for them is positioning. They're doing it to show good faith in that, you know, well, first of all, they want to have a big stage for what they're doing, and they know they got a lot of eyes to do it. But they could probably do their own press conferences and get numbers now. They're already doing it. Sony's doing it. Nintendo's doing it. They're doing things outside of E3. They have decided to leave the big trade show and do their own show. Because they just don't, you know, but they'll still slip in some announcements or they'll do things around the time because they know this is the big time. Everyone's looking for it. Indies is a lot more interesting because you're an indie developer. You've probably poured your own heart and soul and money into this game. You've got a very limited budget and you say, how can I get the most exposure? And I think there's two ways to do it. One is through a grassroots effort of engaging in community early, giving people a very early look at the game and allow them to help you shape it. And some people love that. They love having that community and building it up, right? But others have a very strict vision. They don't want to deal with that, right? So then they have to choose what trade show they want to show this. E3 for a long time was a very walled garden and only certain press could get into it. And so that was difficult.
That's a whole nother element.
It is, and we can go talk all about that. Now that it's funny, now that E3 has losing momentum, they're starting to say we're going to invite everybody. now.
Everybody's all going.
Right, but there's other things that have come and take their place. PAX is a big one. Penny Arcade Expo. They used to just have one a year. Now they have 4, and they do it at various different times in different geographical areas. And so there's a lot of indie game buzz there. People will set up a booth, let you play their game and just get that kind of feedback from people. And their main goal out of that is to tell you about their Kickstarter, tell them about their Stream Greenlight. For those that don't know these gaming terms, it's like a way for you to pre-order, for you to sign up, to get your name, right? It's all about that funnel, trying to get people to engage you in some way, get on a list so that you can re-engage them. It's about saying, are you interested enough in this idea that I can have your name, please? You know? Or how about if you give me a little bit of money, I'll give you a taste early on. And that's a lot of, I mean, it's very familiar with a lot of other type of marketing. It's just, this is gaming.
Good marketing and sales tactics. So, you know, if you're listening, write that down because it's basically, here's the interest and then let's showcase it. The next phase is like, hey, are you interested enough to be able to get your name? And then how can you slowly start to give them more into your world and get them interested? Eventually they'll, you know, either buy your product or tell other people about it, be involved with your service, or be able to donate, you know, money to help invest, you know, into what you're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So then once you get them involved and interested, then you just try to build the community more and more and more. And then you either have some money from pre-orders to be able to fund your launch, or you know you have a captivated audience that when you do launch, hopefully you can convert a good percentage of that.
So I guess that actually directly translates to how a big business can then also, you know, what they should do when going into other types of trade shows. So like even besides E3, depending on what their area, their industry that they're in, you know, how do they get integrated with other conferences, events, trade shows? But then maybe they should actually do some stuff on their own. That's what it sounds like. You know, if you got the money, the audience, the attention, and you're always a part of other things, maybe you should look at, how do we do some stuff in-house? How do we get out there? So I think that's a good learning lesson even for bigger businesses as well, because I know that sometimes you're just doing what you always do, you know?
Yeah. Well,
when you're that big, you know, it's just you're always, it's like, well, we always go to that trade show every single year. We always do this. Times have changed, you know, especially, you know, things are going a lot more virtual, you know, so it's like people got to be able to adapt and be able to create.
Yeah, and I think it's important when we talk about in-house, you've got to be careful about not being stagnant and not relating or doing the unique thing that new companies are doing. So sometimes it's a mixture of both. It goes, we're going to have our own established thing, we're going to do it, but maybe through sponsorships, maybe through partnerships with others that are doing some things unique, we try to create kind of a blend of something new. Nintendo, for example, has done something really unique in the past few years that I would never dream that they would have done 10 years ago, which is they have given their IP to indie games to allow them to create interesting little spin-offs that people kind of understand are not not the game.
The game,
but so they recently found a company that did a rhythm action game and said, you know, it'd be really cool if we did Zelda with that. And they gave them a giant IP and trusted them that they were going to create something, a unique little experience. And I just thought that's a great way for them to market their brand.
It's innovative.
Right. Through other games and medium. Like it's fantastic, you know. If you owned a kitchen and you were really well known for making good cakes, you know, if you partnered with some cupcake shop to make a unique cupcake or something and did that, you know, they have their own audience, they have their own brand. You're helping someone and, you know, raising them up, right? And in turn, I mean, they get the appreciation of the bigger brand not being this colossal monster that doesn't have a soul, you know, which could be a very good idea. So sometimes, you know, working and trusting your brand to key people and doing some unique things outside of your in-house marketing can be beneficial too.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's, first of all, that's, you know, even from small to medium to big size companies, that's really good knowledge and feedback, you know, as far as a marketing approach. But even from the small businesses, so the indie way that you were saying, what's interesting is it's like, but you need to be a part of something and showcase something, at least to show like, hey, we're here, you know, don't forget about us, you know, and show some face. And I think that there's a lot of smaller businesses that don't take that seriously, you know, of just saying like they're kind of in their day-to-day, they're in the weeds, and they're not outwardly thinking about brand awareness of like, oh, we should at least show some presence in these areas, because maybe they don't want to foot the bill or, you know, be able to have the budget to go to things. It's a decision factor, but it shows the importance of saying that don't forget about us. Don't forget about us. Don't forget about us. I mean, that's what you got to think, even from a small business perspective of like, they only have a finite amount of resources to work with. But that's why even the big companies still constantly, like AT&T, Samsung, you know, all these gigantic brands that you would think that, why are they running commercials anymore? You know, we already know who they are. Well, it's because they want to be in front and say, don't forget about us over here. And that brand recognition is so important. So I think we're, you know, from people that don't, if you're not even in the gaming, you know, into gaming industry type stuff, you can take a lot of takeaways from this, from this type of example with E3, the different type of game publishers, because they're all businesses. They're all businesses. It's just, it's about gaming, which is a gigantic industry. So it's. I know sometimes people are like, well, I don't know, it's just kid stuff. They play a bunch of games and, you know, I don't know what they're on, but
that was probably true in the 80s and early 90s. But somewhere in the early 2000s, gaming beat movies in overall revenue, and it's just continued to snowball ever since. So if you think it's just for kids anymore, there's a lot of 30 and 40 something spend a lot of money on this that'll prove you wrong. But that being said, it's a good general look at how do you make a brand and how do you stay relevant if you're big and if you're small, and how do you cross pollinate. And I think that there's a lot of synergies that happen between both. They both help one another a lot.
For sure.
Think of how many big companies swallow some small company because they came out with something innovative and they just need to take it, or they're going to be the dinosaur, right? So it's just that same continuous cycle, you know, and everyone gets ideas from everybody else. I mean, that's kind of humanity. So, so, right? I mean, like for marketing and things too, you're just going to see something unique or new and go, that's interesting. I can spin that a little different my way, and you just
your own
keep
unique
going.
Take on it.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, you just keep going.
Yeah.
I got a question for you about E3, because we kind of talked about the history, talked about where it is now. Where do you think it's going? Do you think E3 is going to continue to be something that's like, hey, the world stops, or used to stop, but at least in the gaming industry, people got their eyes and ears on it? Or do you think it's going to fade away and that companies are just kind of going to do their own thing? Or do you think another platform is going to kind of emerge to take its place?
I think E3 as we know it is done. It's already done. I think the best thing that E3 can do is they can go to some other conventions that are there, and they could look at the indie to middle tier gaming, and they can use it as a platform to raise those up.
Okay.
And I think that's
they need it. They need that awareness.
Right, exactly. You know? They need to go to places that really need the marketing and the boost and package it together in something that people are going to care about. Now, what's interesting is that Microsoft specifically has decided that they want to sell you a gaming subscription, a platform. So it's to their benefit to also take games and ideas, scoop them together, and present them. Even indie games, because it gives them variety. The physical, being of E3, of us all gathering somewhere and doing something, the kind of money and time it takes and the distraction it takes from building the games otherwise. I think Nintendo had it right a few years ago when they started partnering with Best Buy during E3 to show demos. I think more companies are going to do that. And they're probably going to do it through streaming. They're going to say...
Streaming, okay. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think in 5 years, what's going to happen is you're going to get to this time of year, and they're going to want to have a big hype train. So every company is going to go, all right, here's our slate of new games, and here are some limited time, stream it if you want to, demos of the games we have. And they just turn it off like a switch when it's over. That makes... And it's kind of this quick little rental system, get a little taste of these things, get people interested in it, and turn it off. I generally think that idea is going to take off more and more and more. I think
streaming's getting bigger and bigger.
It is.
Every single year, and that because the access to live streaming is just so readily available for everyone, and especially with Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, all just directly putting that in there. So I think that's a very creative and effective way to at least control and once again host your own party and be able to say, hey, I'm going to make sure no leaks get out, but we can turn this on and turn it off when we want to, and still and pull people in that we want to, like you said, with the Best Buy type approach where it's like just thinking about partnership. Interesting that you're saying that getting all together, that's completely going to be...
I don't think it's gonna go away in the fact that it's not cost effective for an E3. I am not saying that getting together is ineffective and don't do it. What I'm saying is the idea of what E3 was, where we get these giant press only guarded wall, is not ever going to turn back into what it was back in 2001 when I was at.
You're a legend, by the way, because now we can't.
I love the fact that I got to go.
People can't experience that nowadays.
It's sad. It really is sad. If you have a trade show that you go to every year and you learn something from it and you build partnerships from it, I love that experience and still think that should be part of what society does. I just, from a gaming perspective and what the timelines are and what the pressures are and how it works. I mean, Sony and some of these other things are having events. Come to our tent. We're going to have these games. Nintendo does a giant trailer truck and drives it to all these cities and does like the Nintendo experience where they get a city block and they set up and then everyone play Nintendo and then they pack it up and go after a week and everyone locally can get in and try it out. That stuff works and that stuff should continue to happen. I think it's really good. The only reason that Microsoft's still doing it is because they're the only one left. They can be the big show at the thing.
The big show.
They don't have any competition.
Own it now.
But they do. So you could look at E3 as just the Microsoft show. And you're fine, right? I mean, there's other people that are there, EA, Ubisoft. I'm not trying to diminish that. But I mean, they are the big one. And if you're the only one in town and you can hog the whole spotlight, I don't see any problem with them continuing to do that. But that's what it is.
Well, you heard it here first, people. Cory Kroll said that E3 is no more.
Put my email. We'll see the reaction I get to that. I don't think that anyone in the press that follows gaming would debate that. This has been a common thread for years as people have talked about it.
Yeah, and I think talking about E3 has got me thinking about gaming does something so right in the sense of like when you say like predictions and all this like the hype. The build-up.
Yeah, they do a fantastic job of it.
A lot of companies would kill for this type of attention and build-up and talk. I mean, look at us. We're talking about E3 right now. We're literally giving out free content. E3 needs to pay us, all right? Because companies would kill for other people just to talk about their products, to anticipate the new model that's coming out. They would kill for that type of attention. What do you think, like, why did gaming nail that type of hype and attention?
Well, I think a lot of it's just constant improvement and community understanding and building. So I think with any product, a product doesn't live in a vacuum. It doesn't just sit by itself and then never change over the course of its life. I think with any product, you can find a better way to make it, market it, you can figure out new uses for it. Yeah, you can customize it. That's a huge part of it, right? And so every time that you take a step and you innovate or try to change something, people go, "Oh, that's a unique twist. That's something new. That's interesting," right? Yeah. The reason that people aren't wild about Slinky anymore, I mean, maybe they are. I haven't heard anyone talk about Slinky in a long time. Is that people aren't? What new has happened to Slinky lately? It still goes downstairs and
still goes down my steps.
Rolls over your neighbor's dog.
Nephew's still playing with them.
It's still the jingle. But I mean, there isn't anything that's really innovative or new. Compare that to Lego. Lego's just bricks, but they found a lot of unique ways to, package the bricks in a new and innovative ways. They found ways to tie it with other brands, right? And people are hyped about what's the big, Star Wars Lego thing that's coming out this year. What's the next? How do you take your product and build more brands? And that comes with hype. Because as the community feels like you're listening to them, the product's getting better, you're doing more of the things they want, they get invested in it, and they get very excited about, is this going to be the one that does that extra thing I thought they should have done with it, right?
Right.
And the next game comes out and it's not as good or went in a direction they didn't like, they get the fury.
They get the backlash.
They get the backlash too.
Of the angry mob that they've now created within their community because they're so passionate about that product and they want it to win.
You really got to cultivate it.
Advise the community. Innovate, showcase, advise the community. Keep up that path. I mean, there's more to it, but that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Sure.
And a lot of companies don't do that.
No.
They maybe innovate a product, but they don't showcase it. Or they innovate a product, they showcase it at their couple of trade shows a year, but then they have no community. So it's just look at me, and then look at what we can do.
Sure.
But they don't have anybody hype about it or even talking about it. There's no community around it. No one really cares. If you're not innovating, you're already behind.
Yeah.
If you're not showcasing, you're already behind. And if you're not building a community, you're behind.
Yeah.
And if you have all three of those, you at least can have somewhat of the cycle of gamifying kind of that experience. That you have with your customers. So that way you can build up somewhat of some hype to get it up to the point where people really start caring and appreciating.
Yeah. Well, if people are excited enough to share your product, absolutely take them up on it. I mean, that's free R&D for you, right? I mean, that absolutely is part of it, right? No matter what it is, from coaching and consulting, it can be a physical, tangible product. It can be a lot of different, things or ideas. Not every idea is a winner. You're going to take and go to the next level. But just hearing people out and talking a little bit about it and getting face to face is a big part of it.
Got to get the megaphone and you got to shout it out because if you're not going to do it, who's going to do it?
Right. Your competitor. And they're going to do it. You're right.
Your competitor's going to do it.
Yeah. They're going to go, boy, no one knows about that guy.
From you
they're going to take your idea and they're going to announce it. And you're going to go, I thought of that first. And no one's going to care. I mean, no one's going to care.
Yeah.
So you have to continuously remind people.
Because I know you're being modest at the thing. Like, I don't know about boasting. But to be honest, a lot of people, if it's like that fine line, am I boasting or not? They're not even close to it.
Probably.
So they should just boast. You need to just showcase your what you're doing, showcase the roadmap, what the potential is. And, you got to really have that out there, for people to be able to, really get inside your product. Got to talk about it. You got to talk about it. Looks like we got some TV issues. Let's close out this episode with just some final thoughts on the power of hosting your own party. I think we've talked about a lot of different elements. What's a takeaway from your experience? I mean, you have a ton of experience within development world, but also timing and software and running a business with motorsports and all types of, racing, probably period. Any type of in that space, gaming, and understanding the philosophy of gaming, how to gamify, building apps. I mean, there's just, the list goes on and on. In your words, how would you advise somebody to host their own party?
I would kind of start with what's the point and then work back, which is kind of a funny thing to say, right? But if you're going to spend any money on marketing at all, and you're going to get people together and do something, you should have a product or a service or a takeaway or an action that you're looking for. You should have some kind of a product or service that you're looking for people to be educated on, right? And then what do you want the result to be?
Yeah.
Do you want them to book a meeting with you? Do you want them to buy a product? Do you want to just set up a consultation or a talk with them, that sort of thing? You did a networking event where I thought it was excellent. At the end, you were saying, hey, I want to engage in companies and get talking to them about what they were doing. And you had to sign up, and it was just here's how we can engage in it next. And that's perfect. Yeah. I've been to a lot of events where I get done and I go, what? That's great. It was nice that I saw their name. Maybe I got their card. But actionably, there wasn't
What's the
anything.
next step?
What's the next step? Right.
Just like with the websites that we do, it's like, what's the call to action? That's really good. And I like how you said the word educate instead of sell.
Yeah. Well, you know that's not for everybody. I'm a firm believer that it's really easy to tell when someone's trying to be a salesman or saleswoman. I mean, it's you hear it and you're just like, oh no, here's the pitch.
Here's one of those things.
Here's the thing you rehearsed in your mirror for the day, and now we get to hear it. And it doesn't. It's fine, but I don't care. It just how it doesn't relate to me. If I'm here in person. Talk to me about why I should care directly. Just to throw it back to you too. Yeah. I'm sure that if someone is preparing to host a party or host a talk or a meeting, that there's plenty of things that Forever Media can provide for them. I'll give maybe back to you too as just what would you think? Some of the things
for starting and hosting a party. I mean, you broke it down so good, man. As far as a preliminary thing that you should check for, I would also just make sure that if you're going to host a party, make sure that you have the right branding and imagery of what you want to portray to others. Yeah. I think some people slap things together and then
absolutely.
and then it's like they get it out there and then you don't get that many people showing up to your party. Right. Because you haven't done any due diligence. It doesn't even look like you really care.
People that do show up see there's no polish. So it's probably better if they didn't show up at all.
Yeah, it's better that they didn't show up
right?
at all.
So you'd rather, even if you get a small turnout, treat those people like kings and queens and just
oh my God, I can speak to that
right?
for a second, because when I was performing for shows, not every show was a sold out crowd.
Yeah.
There were shows that there was literally 2 people in a giant, venue.
Yeah.
And I had to rock out like there was thousands.
Yeah. And that's
great.
great.
Sometimes some of the hardest things to do. To think that you're performing for thousands, but then you
squint,
you can see the floor.
It
does something to your mindset.
Sure.
But it's about getting through that and still performing because look, they showed up.
Yeah.
And you got to give them a show.
Yeah.
I think that wraps up this episode.
I think so.
Perfectly. Thank you so much for hopping on. You're going to see a lot more of Cory Kroll on the Forever podcast. For all the people that are viewing, comment, and subscribe to the channel. We drop all different types of topics. Who knows what we'll be talking about next?
Yeah, that's true.
Once again, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Till next time. Peace.